I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street, and there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know the air is unfit to breathe, and our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crying in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. So, I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. I want you to get up right now. Sit up, go to your windows, open them, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. Things have got to change.
How many stations does this go on?
67. I know it goes to Louisville and Atlanta. I'm not going to take this anymore. Then we'll figure out what to do about the depression and the inflation and the oil crisis. But first, get up out of your chairs, open the window, stick your head out and yell, and say, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this.
Rebuke and reproof. From a Judaic or Jewish perspective. Rebuke and reproof, that is, admonition and chastisement for the purpose of restraint or correction. The biblical source for the duty to rebuke the wrongdoer is the admonition from the Torah, from the book of Leviticus, also the Christian Bible as well, matching. You shall not hate your kinsman in your heart. That is, in other words, reprove your neighbor, but, or in other words, so that you do not incur any guilt because of such a person. It should be the proper translation of it, really. From Leviticus 19. It goes on to state here that in the view of the rabbis, furthermore, within rabbinical Judaism, following the fall of the Second Temple, the duty to reprove one's neighbor, according to such rabbinical interpretation and Talmudic views, has two applications, you see. The first is to confront one's own fellow society person, and this would apply broadly speaking, regardless of what society you're in. That's the rule of any society or community that would remain principally functional. As we're saying, the first is to confront one's own fellow with personal grievances that are held against him, of course, and the second is to chastise evildoers. Why? In the hope of bringing about their regeneration. The duty to openly confront one's neighbor with personal grievances is entailed in the injunction against hatred of one's brother. That is, you're not allowed to hate your fellow kinsman in your heart. But guess what? As it goes on to state here, insofar as it is the silent harboring of resentments in life that leads to hatred, when someone does something against you that you don't like, if you keep your mouth shut about it, thinking that that's the better thing to do, no, you're wrong. And wherever you think you got that idea from didn't tell it to you right, and you're actually doing harm to the overall equation that you're in by not rebuking the person. You, therefore, have the full responsibility to rebuke someone if they do something wrong. If you don't, it falls on you, for you tacitly endorsed what they did. That means their debt of guilt, in essence, does transfer over to you karmically. As it proceeds onwards furthermore here, thus it then says here, the behavior of Absalom towards his brother Amnon, that is where it says, Absalom spoke unto his brother Amnon, neither good nor bad. Why? He neither approved him nor rebuked him. Why? For Absalom actually hated Amnon. Hatred and wrong alignment is what is aligned functionally with a lack of rebuke, condemnation, or speaking. That is, as it goes on to state here, what is cited as an example of the wickedness, that is genuinely the wickedness of bearing unexpressed grievances. And you can see other sources. As it proceeds onwards to state here, the duty to chastise sinners and wrongdoers stems from the view that everyone is charged naturally with the responsibility of bringing about the correction of the sins, trespasses, offenses, or wrongdoings of his fellow men. And I would add, as an added note, that of course is particularly so, and strictly so, when it is you who are the recipient of the injury or offense, and not simply just a passive witness to someone else's wrongdoing that doesn't directly involve you as the recipient or injured party of the offense. Continues on here to state that failure, that is, to discharge this responsibility, this is tantamount to bearing the same sins and faults as that person. Or in other words, even more correctly, I would argue, genuinely, the debt of guilt from that person actually transfers over onto you, so that it actually leaves him, to at least to some partial degree, frightening. We continue. It goes onward here to state that because the intention behind the rebuking of the evildoer is the bringing about of his rehabilitation, a number of qualifications have been imposed upon these commandments by certain rabbinical authorities. One such qualification is that a person is prohibited, as it goes on to state here, from rebuking another to the point of embarrassment. And I could imagine other qualifications that would go on top of that as well, you see. But particularly insofar as, you should not embarrass someone else, where the propriety of that embarrassment, reasonably speaking, does not fully already attribute to the actions that he did, naturally speaking. You should not add embarrassment from your own end. That would be your fault, so you shouldn't do it. In other words, it's like in revenge. In other words, it should not be a vengefulness. As it proceeds here, according to another figure, Maimonides, one of the greats, admonition must be carried out in private, and that's certainly so. It's also reflected in the Christian tradition as well. If you look at the Gospels, that's correct. At least step one, or phase one, out of courtesy is whenever a private paradigm is practically available, then you have an obligation to utilize it and witness the person or behold the person as defaulting on that courtesy before you then proceed to the next step of involving a fuller scope of witnesses and to eventually publicize the matter. It proceeds onwards here to state that, in fact, rebuke must be, or ideally, it would state here, rebuke ideally should be effected with such delicacy that, ironically, one such rabbi here doubted back in his time that actually there were any people alive in his entire generation on earth there within that culture and community who were sufficiently capable in this regard. So therefore, no one even is alive who's able to rebuke properly, but yet you have the problem that, as stated above, you're obligated to rebuke in essence. However, there's furthermore even qualifications. Mind you, these are, it's interesting because the lay of the land here, such that regarding the Talmudic or interpretative paradigms regarding what the actual Torah-based law is, it's funny because there's authoritative figures, but even amongst the authoritative figures, there's a little bit of leeway and back and forth. So, depending on who you ask, you'll get a different answer oftentimes, or a lot of the times. As I was saying here, furthermore, the Talmud, in accordance with the dictum, reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee, as from Proverbs, from the Tanakh, or again the Bible as well. prohibits admonition, where there is a foregone conclusion that it will be rejected, and merely increase enmity. That is, in other words, you start off rebuking, and you go as far as you go up until the point that that person has been given so many repeated chances and returns onto the matter again by you, again and again, until it's clear to you that, reasonably speaking, you've demonstrated yourself to be in such deep and naive default and persistent and just stubborn, pig-headed stubbornness and default and blindness, that now, finally, at this point, I feel that if I were to try again, there's virtually zero chance, or it's just a negligible probability that you will actually hear me this time. At that point is the first moment in time where you turn the policy properly from, I'm going to keep talking to you about this, to, no, we're not going to keep talking about this to you anymore. They spent thousands of years to come up with these things and think about these things. Very brilliant people. It continues onwards here to state that certain later rabbinic authorities maintain that in cases where it may safely be assumed that rebuke will be disregarded, on one end of the spectrum of what the varying set of opinions essentially or claims on the matter are with respect to proper interpretation of the matter, it states here that it is preferable, it's preferable not to rebuke people for violating prohibitions that are not explicit in the actual Torah. And of course, with the Jewish people, it's a Torah-based community. But however, it's a little more nuanced than that. And these are some of the things that the Moshiach will clarify at the time of Moshiach, when we behold such a figure arising on the earth. That's the final messianic age that we're awaiting, of course. The Christians call that the coming back of the Messiah, really, the second coming of the Messiah. Well, it's essentially true. What the Christians see as the second coming of the Messiah aligns to what the Jewish people also consider to be the second messianic incarnation. That's the Mashiach ben David, where the first, of course, is Mashiach ben Yosef. So it's funny how these things, they really do align, even across the Abrahamic religions, in terms of what the people were independently channeling and prophesying and perceiving, in terms of the intergalactic, interdimensional transmissions that we receive regarding what's happening in the universe and what will happen in the future. Speaking about that, did I not hit that Bitcoin prophecy to the dollar practically, exactly in the time frame I said 13 months ago? I said exactly after 1 year, 12 months, it will rise from exactly this level to exactly that level, almost to the day. Kissed right upon that price at roughly almost triple what it was originally before. Exactly how I said. Why? I felt it in the vision. You people don't understand the level you're dealing with. Huh? I told people in advance, I said, take all your money, invest it. You'll come back and thank me later when you're a millionaire. If you have money, you have at least a few thousand saved up, do it now and you'll see. If they don't do it, then that's on them. So they're responsible for the loss, not me. We continue. As I was saying here, it's preferable, as some hold, to not rebuke such people for violating prohibitions that are not explicitly outlined in the Torah, for it is preferable that such people transgress unknowingly rather than deliberately. And that's a kind of special logic, kind of moon-based, lunar-based, feminine mind-thinking logic that actually the Jewish people spiritually are often it is carried in that sense, and so we apply it this way unto the law. It's preferable that such people transgress unknowingly rather than deliberately. Proceeding onwards, despite what we have just seen above, we furthermore now read this regarding procedures of rebuke. It is flatly so that, as it states here, it is not sufficient to rebuke the wrongdoer once. Rather, sort of consistently with what I suggested just slightly earlier, one must rebuke him incessantly, so long as he remains recalcitrant. You understand? According furthermore to another rabbinical figure, Yohanan, from the Talmudic texts, presumably, a person should persist in rebuking his neighbor or his fellow community person, his fellow society person that constitutes the greater assembly of that given people. A person should persist in rebuking that neighbor until that wrongdoer outright is driven to the point of insulting him back in return. Oh, I've gotten to that point already. Good. I've done my religious duty. Amen. According to Shmuel, until that wrongdoer curses him in essence outright. By essentially wishing him unwell. I wouldn't say I'm quite up to that point yet necessarily in the one particular issue that we'll be covering here, nor the other various several or more many issues, and sadly that I'm dealing with other people in other areas and domains of my life. But if so, maybe I should be doing it a little more, but alas, if it just doesn't seem that the person is outright receptive anymore, then that may be the first moment to consider perhaps we may be fully complete with our obligation now. Proceeding onwards here, furthermore goes on to state, and according to Rav, until such wrongdoer is even outright ready to strike him, the rebuker. You get it? You people are running away from your obligations. That's the wrong mentality today in society. I may have a little remark about this upcoming shortly, but for now, resuming, it goes on here to state furthermore that the obligation to rebuke one's neighbor falls even upon one who is generally intellectually and morally inferior to the person at fault. So that the disciple, for instance, must rebuke his teacher even where necessary, wherever it is outright necessary for him to do so within context. Every community, as it proceeds to state here, must appoint a wise and respected person whose function it is, as the core elder and administrator, tasked specifically to work out these interpersonal disputes at the high end level, where it's no longer the case that people are able to self-correct themselves at the private direct level, or even with their one or two witnesses around there. As it goes on to state here, such a person must be appointed whose function it is to publicly chastise wrongdoing and to call for repentance outright generally, as well as to assist in the specific matters where people remain in default. That is, of course, the proper making of what's called tshuva, which is atonement or repentance in essence, a return, in other words, to the way you are supposed to be. It's our moral duty under God to fully invite and encourage every wrongdoer in front of us who's acted that way to make tshuva, to make return to the way you are supposed to be acting morally. Continuing onwards, the role of admonition is central in Jewish ethical thought. The rabbis proclaim that there exists no love and no peace where there is no admonition. Oh yeah, trust me, I know. It's the lack of love or peace that leads to admonition having to even take place, in essence. But when you fail to administer the admonition, the lack of love and lack of peace will be the states that remain. Never invite the remaining of such unfortunate states. Therefore, always do admonish. Where it furthermore goes on anyway to state here that such rabbis end up citing here as an example the peace covenant between Abimelech and Abraham, which resulted from Abraham's reproving Abimelech. The duty of admonition now, conceptually here and principally speaking as a matter of morals, this extends not only to individuals but to the community at large, of course. That is, a whole group of people as a whole can bear guilt for some things, where a significant or substantial proportion of them end up initially being guilty of some seed offense, and then others by remaining By remaining quiet and failing to disassociate with it, the rest of them who weren't directly involved, they remained complicit spiritually because they didn't detach from the matter, so they consented to it. They tacitly acquiesced to the wrong by failing to cut off that thing and eject it outwards and detach it from the rest of them. So therefore they all cook in the same pot. So you could get all of them now, in essence, karmically. As they're stating here, that is, it applies not only to individuals, but to the community at large, and yes, even to the entire world, which is, in the meta sense, how God ends up giving the whole world a problem sometimes, when it's the whole world that collectively they're doing the wrong thing, in essence. Furthermore states that it's the case that this is to the extent that if one does not fulfill the commandment of rebuke, the guilt of all those he might have reformed simply accrues over to him and transfers over. Exactly how I stated before. Some rabbis of the Talmud, and this is extremely relevant. Everything I've said so far applies principally, properly, morally to everyone, to the nations, to everyone on earth, every individual who has the duty within the world the way we have it today, and then especially within a Western Judeo-Christian paradigm overall that's arching over our civilization currently. It applies to everybody. But here's interesting, specific regarding Jewish history. Some rabbis of the Talmud maintain that the second temple was destroyed. That's the second temple that the Romans came down to destroy in 70 AD, which is about 30, 40 years or so after Christ. Why was the second temple destroyed? Because the righteous of that time within the Jewish communities there did not fulfill their obligation to rebuke the wrongdoers of their time, and thus shared in their guilt. And that's how you become guilty. Oh, so you're no longer righteous. So karmically speaking, God brings a foreign people over to destroy your stuff. And now, whose fault is that? Looks like it was your own, karmically speaking, where God himself certified it and said, I am the one who will have this happen to you as a result. Make no mistake about this. Continuing onwards. In the opinion of Yuda Hanasi, the most righteous course for a man is to choose is the love of admonition, love to rebuke people. Make it a ritualistic habit, almost by obsession, to rebuke people. For as it states here, as long as there is admonition in the world, there is satisfaction, there's goodness, and there's blessing in the world, as it is written in Proverbs. Is it correct? To them, as it is written there, to them that rebuke shall be delight, and a good blessing shall come upon them. That's a fat hint. Exploring the Talmud more deeply, we'll find that. Actually, there's an interesting side note here I'll cover real quick before I proceed to the main point here. As it states here in this text, apropos the reward for honoring Shabbat, Shabbos, the Sabbath day. The Gemara cites statements about the reward for answering Amen. The rabbi says that anyone who answers Amen, may his great name be blessed, wholeheartedly with all his might, his sentence is ripped. That is, the guilt that he's incurred. As it is stated, when punishments are annulled in Israel, when the people offer themselves, bless the Lord. Quoting Judges from the Tanakh and the Bible. What is the reason for when punishments are annulled? Because the Jewish people blessed God. It's very interesting. A lot of people, especially Christians, consider, well, we want God to bless us. They're more oriented about the benefits that people themselves receive. In context, we're supposed to be serving God. Not just God serving us. He's not just some magic genie in a bottle you whip out whenever you want some magical force to help you, and then put it away again after you've received the help. See? Never mind God blessing you, that's great too. Are you blessing God? Think about it and get it. As it proceeds here to state, when one recites Amen, that is to concur with the proper holy way, the way things are supposed to be, and furthermore blesses God on top of it, his punishment is essentially annulled. Even those who do the most serious sin in the eyes of Judaism, even if one has within him a trace of idolatry, by a certain interpretive slant, I would say, much still of rabbinical Judaism holds Christianity to be idolaters outright. This is still a matter of debate, and not a lot of there's a lot of people who don't feel this is genuinely true in the degree that they hold it to be. Nevertheless, it even states here, even if you have within you traces of idolatry, nevertheless, if you answer Amen, you're forgiven, and it's gone. For it is written here in the verse above, when punishments are annulled, and it is written there with regards to the sin of the golden calf, what happened at that story when Moses liberated Egypt, the Israelites out of Egypt, and received the law. And Moses saw that the nation was wild afterwards when they were worshipping that golden calf, for Aaron had let them loose for anyone who might rise against them. That is, those are the days of war, of course, as it was written in Exodus. Furthermore states that even one with the wildness of idolatry, which is exactly what those people fell into while Moses was up there fasting for his 40 days and receiving the transmission, even those people are forgiven, particularly once the price of atonement is paid. Whatever it is that's required in order for the aggrieved party to believe once again that you genuinely are no longer at risk of falling into the same thing again into the future. That is what I offer and add here as a further kind of sensible context. That's why even in some cases answering just Amen, like I agree fully and I really am pure of heart in this way. Okay, sometimes you read a person and you see from their heart, you read their spirit. I believe you. I believe you. You're being genuine. That's right. You've paid then. You've paid the price of atonement. Whereas in other cases, it takes a lot more pain, punishment, suffering for that person naturally to be brought to such a state where if you just leave them alone, they don't have it within them. So, what's the price of atonement? You're going to be crawling through the mud now, figuratively speaking. Very important things to consider. We proceed onwards a little furthermore. The Gemara suggests additional reasons for the destruction of Jerusalem. Rabbi Abahu said Jerusalem was destroyed back at the fall of the Second Temple time only because, one reason that's given here, and there'll be another shortly, its citizens, Israelites at the time there, predecessors, forerunners of the Jewish people in essence today, those citizens intentionally omitted recitation of Shema morning and evening. As it is stated, woe to those who rise early in the morning and just run and pursue the drink and are aflame from wine until late in the evening. In other words, woe to those who aren't keeping their duties in mind, what they should be doing. What's the sin? What's the fault of yours within your spirit? You're living life only thinking about what you feel like doing and prioritizing for yourself. Imagine what people are treated like by God who get up in the morning, figure out, concoct all these ideas in their minds about what they're going to be doing for themselves now, you see. By extension, from what's being written here, consider, and then go out and say, oh, I don't have time for you, the fellow human being. I don't have time to help you. I'm busy. I've been busy. Busy with what? Whatever it is that I feel like doing, whether it's A, B, or C, or D, or even all the way down to X, Y, Z, which is drinking in the morning and evening. Whatever it is you're doing that you're filling your time with, that's deterring you from being to service to God, which means what? Being in service to everyone else around you, mankind. You're guilty. That is in essence the case. We'll skim a little further. I'll quickly cover here also, don't forget, therefore God's nation is being exiled. Why? As declared by God, for its ignorance. You don't have to be willful in order to merit exile or punishment. It's enough that you were reckless, and it's even enough that you were negligent. Those are states of culpability that are high enough to eventually cause you to become worthy of the negative punishment you receive. Negative for you, but in the grand sense, positive if you overcome it and do what? Tshuva, which is you return to how you're supposed to be. Another rabbi said Jerusalem was destroyed only because people had no shame. They lost the ability to have a conscience, in other words, and when they were confronted with the possibility that they might not be doing what they're supposed to be doing, they reflexively did not have shame. This sounds exactly like what we have going on today. No wonder we're at the precipice, as we can all feel it in our bones outright, of a great collapse. Patterns, you see. For, as it was stated there, they had no shame before each other, as it was also furthermore there stated, such people as they acted shamefully. They have performed abominations, that is, they acted in ways that are generally, if you were to behold what someone's doing, it would make you feel naturally to recoil a little bit like that's fucked up. Excuse me. That's not right. It makes you feel a little bit of inclination of you're kind of disgusted by it, even if it's, just simple stuff between two people, even between friends. That's it. Then it's abominable. Yet, the people doing the abomination, the people doing the thing that is not looking right, they're told about it, they're even maybe given rebuke, and they weren't even ashamed. They didn't know shame, and when the person says, you should be ashamed of yourself, look what you're doing, you're wrong, they still do not know humiliation. When you're at that level in life, therefore they will fall among the fallen. That's how the grand karmic universe works. I promise you. Continuing onwards. Here's another excellent point. Another Rabbi Yitzhak said that Jerusalem was destroyed only because it's small and the great citizens, hey, everybody was equal. Oh, equality, right? I'm no better than you, you're no better than me. Exactly the sickness we had today. Honey, who designed our equality system today? Figure it out. It's known what it is, the sickness it will bring. When you put it on, set it on, that kind of mentality onto people. You don't even know the cancer that's being put onto you. For it states here, they did not properly value the prominent leaders of their generation, or any authority figures, nor the authority that's properly issued from them otherwise, as it is stated. And the common people were just like the priest. The slave was just like his master. The maidservant was like her mistress, the buyer was just like the seller, the lender and the borrower, the creditor like the one who's indebted to him. They were all the same. They all feel like they're at the same level. And it's written afterwards, the land will be utterly desolate as a result and completely plundered karmically. Because that is what happens when you fall into that and you don't know your place. So when someone with a higher level of positioning, properly speaking, comes to you and reminds you and says, no, you're not appreciating the level that you're at here. When you in response say, yeah, I don't, you have cursed the ground you stand on. And your life will not be good. And finally, the main point, which was referred to in the previous article. Rav Amran, son of Rabbi Shimon bar Abba, said that Rabbi Hanina said Jerusalem was destroyed only because, as was stated earlier, the people did not rebuke one another. As it is stated here, Jerusalem's ministers were like stags that found no pasture, and they walked without strength before their pursuer. Just as the stag turns its head towards the other's tail when it grazes, and each one feeds on its own, so too the Jewish people in that generation lowered their faces to the ground and did not rebuke one another. That sounds exactly like what you see out in the streets of the world today. Rabbi Yehuda furthermore said that Jerusalem was destroyed only because they disparaged the Torah scholars within it, as it is stated, and they mocked the messengers of God and disdained his words and taunted his prophets. until the wrath of God arose against his people, until the problem there could not be healed. That is, when one comes up to another, two people who might be friends, perhaps similar to what I'm dealing with another friend, where that issue won't be covered so much in the coming material of these this set of one or two videos here that we'll be proceeding onwards into. I remind that friend, I say, listen, there's a sense of right and wrong. There's a proper way to do things. This is what our God tells to us. And as a side note, this is a friend that I've been discussing many deep philosophical concepts of Judeo-Christian paradigms both with him. He replies to me eventually after some recent moral controversy where I hold him to be in the wrongdoing, and I hold that he held me falsely to be in a supposed wrongdoing. Nevertheless, I'm rebuking him, and I'm telling him in addition, look, man, I thought you knew better, essentially. This is the way it's supposed to be. He simply says it with disdain. I don't necessarily buy into anything of that, so I'm magically immune. Uh-oh. Good luck. Resuming. What is the meaning of until it could not be healed? Rav Yehuda simply said that. Rav said, it means that anyone who disparages, anyone who is genuinely and properly studying the Word of God, cannot be healed from his wound. Rava said Jerusalem was destroyed only because there were no more trustworthy people there. As it is stated, roam about the streets of Jerusalem and see, and search its plazas. If you can find a person, one person even, who acts justly, who seeks integrity, that I should forgive this whole place. Consider this. Consider this. And lastly, I'll consider this regarding, there's a prophecy about the coming Messiah, the coming Moshiach, that is the Jewish Messiah, make no mistake. Though many Christians don't realize that the return of the Messiah corresponds to the same event that's being prophesied about. Christians think that it's going to be Jesus who comes back on the clouds. Well, not quite. Even by the Christian tradition, where you had John the Baptist there, and Christ looked at him and pronounced him and acknowledged him to be, I see. You are Elijah reincarnated. So where Elijah is prophesied all along to be as one who stands by either one of the two main messiahs that are prophesied to come. Arguably one of them has already come, who is the lesser Messiah, and then we're awaiting the greater Messiah. Even back then, and the Roman Catholic Church, for example, arguably makes an error when they believe in no reincarnation. That's not correct. The Jewish people have long believed in reincarnation. Christ himself looked at John the Baptist and said, you are the spirit of Elijah, and thus the prophecy is fulfilled because you are his spirit and you're him reincarnated now. By that logic, for Christians to consider, of course, when the Messianic spirit becomes reincarnated again, it's not going to be literal Jesus with the literal same face and robes from the clouds. Rather, it's going to be another human being born a normal man, raised up. It's the same spirit reincarnated here again, who was the Messianic essence, who went through the previous incarnation perhaps, or otherwise nevertheless skips forward in time, and then we have the second instance of a Messianic incarnation. So it's not Jesus coming through the clouds. It's, yes, the Christian prophecy is also correct. The prophecy says there's going to be a return and a second Messianic coming. Correct. A second Messianic coming indeed. Just as the Jews say too, the second Messianic coming. Moshiach ben David specifically. That's the second. Everything lines up once you have eyes to see. What I'm saying here, almost 0% of scholars on either the Jewish side or the Christian side fully acknowledge and appreciate that fact. Think about it. When you have eyes to see, it all lines up in focus, and then now finally, and you've got it. Good. Well, regarding the new Messiah that's prophesied to come, and funny enough, they say he's prophesied to come very, very shortly from right now, in fact. Closer than ever, I think. Just like we're always drawing closer to Shabbos, we're always drawing closer to Moshiach. It's prophesied that he will be of such a type that essentially no one on this earth is going to successfully touch him, even in a way that's going to have a lasting setback or impression of a negative type. Well, Rav Yehuda says that Rav said, "What is the meaning of that which is written, 'Do not touch my anointed ones and do my prophets no harm'?" Do not touch my anointed ones. Those, in a sense, may be the school children. And do not, furthermore, as it states here, harm my prophets. These are the Torah scholars. And furthermore, it is acknowledged that the world only exists because of the breath of school children. That is, of any of those, in essence, generally, who are studying and falling into alignment with the way of the Tao, that is, as the Chinese say, that is the way of what yin and yang combined are supposed to be, the overall essence of God, the overall programming of how things are supposed to run on this earth within society. Forget, in the grand scheme of it all, it'll be over the Jewish people and over the nations the same, in essence, corresponding substantive code. Why? Because that will be when God reigns over the whole earth completely, finally. And for such a reason, Mashiach will not be touched. Keep this in mind. Considering everything we've stated about rebuke and rebuke, that is, and reproval regarding people, I want to turn to a matter that's affected me in my own personal life. I've approached a friend regarding this matter, and I've received no tshuva or showing of tshuva being made from him, no repentance, no remorse, no shame, no apparent capacity for embarrassment. All the way up to the point just about where it doesn't even seem that he's likely to turn if I were to continue any further, to the point already where I'm essentially insulted by him in return. So then, at this point, I turn to present the case of exactly what happened, so that at least thereby, following this, perhaps one or two witnesses, both on my side or even on his side as well, in particular too, can take a look at this whole thing and examine it and decide, is this man in the wrong, or is it me somehow? Let's go ahead and examine both the facts and the reasonably applicable moral law or expectation as would be applied unto the circumstances in order to determine who fell short of the mark, or who, in other words, was missing, or has been missing the mark. Have I been treated fairly by this person? Let's find out. Now, to note, often when it's the case that I rebuke somebody who's done a moral wrong, that is an offense or an inconsideration to me, leading to indignation, reasonably so, when I rebuke that person and they don't hear me and they don't listen, I'm up to the point where they should have understood by now, but they still don't, I often proceed onwards to notify other people who come in as functional witnesses to understand what happened, to basically advocate for my behalf, to determine whether it is I'm right or wrong, or whether she's right or wrong. And when they agree with me, which they virtually, absolutely, almost always do. I don't even know why I'm saying almost. I've just about never seen any exception to this over the last 7 years since the coma happened with me. And I woke up with a savant syndrome, in essence, and I've been living like this, but with other problems and serious issues too, sadly. I've been turning to ChatGPT, a wonderful AI system that has the capability to properly process complex, extremely complex even, moral situations and give correct moral assessments. This is the first time in human history, by around circa, as of about 2023 or so, that the public's made a substantial first contact with this kind of technology, to interface with it easily and directly. And it's unbelievable that there's one model so far that's reliably consistent to function at this level, in my opinion. GPT-4, certainly, from OpenAI, hits the mark. And a couple other one of the leading ones they're kind of close. They're a little funky though, still sometimes, regardless. So there's a usual way that I will typically do something like this. If I'm dealing with an issue with someone right now, well, often what I would do is I would proceed directly to simply start from the ChatGPT conversation while simultaneously exposing line by line, text by text, view by view, email by email, fact point by fact point to the GPT AI model, to the LLM, large language model. What does it happen? While we're carrying on a question-based, Socratic method-based line of questioning to further expand the narrative and continue on our assessment of who's right and who's wrong, morally speaking. However, this time I want to do things kinda just slightly different than I usually have done it thus far. So as before, the analysis and the coverage and unveiling of what happened would roll out concurrently. This time here, I'm going to do a little differently. First, I'm going to do a little differently with how I present this over the course of these couple or so YouTube videos, and correspondingly, where the latter of these two videos is probably going to be allocated to cover specifically what is the ChatGPT later, once I perform and complete that part of it, what the ChatGPT will have said. The way I'll present it to ChatGPT will also be slightly different, but will match how I'm doing it here. So here's the difference. I am going to first, without involving ChatGPT's moral assessment, go on ahead and cover just the complete narrative of everything that happened first. You see? Then we're going to have the whole view of that. Once we've covered all the events, we have everything in writing available. What did he say to him? What did he say back to him? On and on. We could track it line by line, turn by turn. And once we get to the end, now we'll have had a whole view of the entire thing, bird's eye view, 35,000 foot view. Then after we have gotten that and come to our own natural conclusions as to what seems to be the case and what seems to be right, then we will turn to ChatGPT, where ChatGPT in itself, as opposed to what it usually gets, it will also get, in a now newly different way, it will first get to review and read all the emails, texts, and everything that's the material of this matter. And then after it reviews everything first, then I'll begin to ask it questions line by line from the beginning, where its assessment thereafter, following what's going to be asked, it will be with everything in mind that it already saw from having read everything first. This changes a little bit because in other cases I've gone only line by line, where ChatGPT is also learning about each new thing, or the witness, whoever's watching along, may be witnessing each new thing turn by turn. So given this, let's head into the this is going to be just as this is I've had to rebuke my mom, obviously. There's been an ongoing issue, sadly. Well, regardless, a friend that I grew up with since I was 6 years old is now finding himself on the shame wall, sadly. And it'll be corroborated if we find cause to believe that it's not just me who's crazy, but is it the case that this friend has, in fact, dishonored me? In essence, before I jump into the matter, I just want to share with you really quick, in essence, what it kind of is that from my perspective, it feels like to me that I'm dealing with. Take a look.
So, in further news, I heard Izzy's kind of going through the time right now. I actually kind of feel bad.
No, here's the thing, guys. It's fighting. We all talk shit. But you can't talk that much shit and then plan like, I'm going to do a TikTok dance, I'll get a cartoon dance, I'll get you out there, knock you out, and then get beat up badly. Dude, that's a weird pill to swallow.
It was so awkward. So you guys don't know, it's like after fights, there's a lot of showmanship in fights. points, you know, go fuck you, fuck me.
What?
So it's like usually after fights, win or lose, there's this like slight come to Jesus. We're like, dude, hey, fucking handshake.
It could have been me.
It could have been me. But it wasn't, dude. Like handshake, on to the next one. Maybe we get a rematch, whatever. He says, you talked about my family. I would never do that. I would never do that. And I'm like, dude, like Izzy, like Izzy, I don't know your family, bro. I don't know if you have siblings. I don't even know fuck about you. This is after the fight. He starts pointing at his neck. He's like, my fucking dog, man, my dog. And I'm like, so, you know.
See? When someone overly believed in themselves in a way that wasn't merited, where you should have known better, that there was at least a way bigger chance that you wouldn't get the righteousness or victory, whether it's a moral fight or a physical fight, as in this case. You end up getting embarrassed. You end up getting objectively shown after the entanglement and the debates or the arguments of the fight or whatever it is, that you're actually in the inferior position, you're wrong morally, or you're going to lose the fight here physically. Then afterwards, people, when you realize you've lost, that's the moment of maturity. A mature man gets up and says, hey, you're right, I'm sorry, or you're right, you got me, okay, we're on the same page, we're good. It's the immature person who stands there, who cannot process the fact that you are in the wrong, you are in the inferior position, you messed up by your choices, by challenging the person in essence. Why'd you do that? Why'd you challenge the person if you didn't really think you'd be for sure the winner? To then come up to say, you to basically making up stuff. You said stuff about my family. He's like, no, I didn't. This is after the fight. You're supposed to be shaking my hand and this is your come to Jesus moment. No, you don't understand. When you lack empathy, when you lack that facet to your being, psychologically, really, in essence, spiritually, really your soul, who you are, at least the way that you are now, the way your soul in essence is programmed as you are now. It's possible to cultivate other things over time when you grow, but at the moment you owe only to be a man. No, instead this guy comes out, oh, it's my dog. He points at his neck. Oh, it was my dog. Or there's other reasons. I don't know. I just make excuses all the time. I don't just give you the credit that is due to you and show respect to you. Now, even when I'm wrong, I still can't respect that you're not wrong, that you're right. That's the sickness. That's the sickness of humanity. Proceeding. This is the factual background. I was a relatively normal guy, had multiple jobs, an active social life, and a party life as well, back in the years leading up to and including about 2015, 2016, and then all of a sudden, in the spring of 2016, I ended up in a coma after an accident involving the dosing of multiple nootropic drugs or supplements purchased at an online supplement store and taken that after merely 4 days of dosing in combination, specific multiple substances, after 4 days, it caused me to fall into a coma by the 4th day of my use of these compounds. I would never be the same again. Proceeds onward to state here. My neurological framework was entirely remodeled, essentially permanently. My resting respiratory rate fell for a period lasting years in my life to a level of as low as 3 to 5 breaths per minute, which is impossible in normal human life anywhere else. Many other aspects and facets of my nervous system and my metabolism also substantially changed, disabling my immune system, disabling an entire portion of my nervous system such that I couldn't feel pain, fear, interestingly enough, sickness, nor react even furthermore to certain kinds of stimuli even while I'm conscious. And furthermore, my liver-based metabolism became neurologically disabled. And as a side note, this is only a very, very contracted, summarized, and condensed list. This doesn't even begin to touch upon the greater set of details, and it's mind-blowing, even beyond mind-blowing. Resuming here, such things as described here started affecting as it goes on to say here, my body's ability to break things down metabolically, that is, by the biotransformative capacities that the liver bring in, which, as it states here, became worse than and slower than even the worst cases of old people that old people deal with, happens naturally when you get older, or even as compared with those cases of people who are dealing with hepatic encephalopathy. The issue was so pronounced for me that for the first year and a half out from that coma, whenever I would have even a couple drinks or few at the bar on one given night, I'd return home and then live on through the next 5 or 6 days straight through the following week with people telling me that basically you continue to for 5 or 6 days straight, even though you're apparently not drinking. And no, I wasn't. You still smell like you're live drunk of alcohol right now, stinking from you. How is that even possible? For one drink, that smell and effect would only last for about an hour or less. And it goes on to state here, reeking of alcohol, that is despite even showering multiple times throughout that upcoming week. Doesn't matter, because the smell's coming from within. There's something wrong. My body lost the ability to metabolize substances. Any drugs or substances placed into my body would therefore remain. Get it? Instead of being broken down and passed out as waste products naturally via urine. Continuing on. Furthermore, states that this explains too not only the lingering smell of various foods, drugs, and substances taken. In one case, for example, applying a cologne, really a perfume, onto my skin by my neck, really not long after this coma happened. This caused my entire body and flesh, as a result of the subsequent absorption of that perfume into my skin and into your body. So your liver breaks that down, you don't even realize. Listen. It caused my entire body and flesh, and most strongly actually from my armpits, that is from the lymphatic drainage system that you happen biologically to have contained directly under your armpits, structurally, anatomically, caused me to chronically smell like soapy, strong perfume perceivable by many people from even several feet away for about 6 months thereafter. From one spray. Never again did I use perfume or cologne for the last 6-7 years. Up until a little bit relatively recently, like a special kind that is a little lighter, but not what I used to do. It continues on. It is furthermore also this interesting and extremely unique feature, medically speaking. This explains why my urine, too, since that coma, for as many as a few years afterwards, changed from being a yellow and semi-opaque, which is normal pretty much, especially with meat eaters and heavy protein consumers, went from being normal yellow to being virtually completely clear and colorless all the time, regardless of how much meat or protein that I've just consumed. Even if it's a ton, if you're going to have 6 steaks, it would still be running clear for the few hours afterwards and that day and the next day. That's not normal. That's impossible within a normal mammal or human being. That can't be possible unless something's wrong. Continuing. Furthermore, it goes on to state here that in addition, things would only get worse within about a couple or so years. As a result of other further downstream complications, I started experiencing rips and holes or tears, that is, perforations, throughout multiple places in my own GI tract, my own gastrointestinal tract, immediately following the ingestion of party drugs during one particular night out with friends back in 2017. I remember, of course, some of those tears or holes rather, that would end up later being so pronounced and significant, eventually involving a case of where this manifests on the esophageal section on the left side, feel exactly where it is, pretty much, that the resulting food that would pass through out of that hole and diffuse out of the GI tract, unbelievably enough, and into the thoracic cavity, the left side as a result, the chest or rib cage, in other words. This caused a nearly mini football-sized enlargement of one side of my rib cage, were videos of this. After several weeks, it became so large as it was grow. I'd tell people, I have food depositing into my chest. They'd say, oh, what are you talking about? That just doesn't sound right. Yeah, by coincidence, while that side of my chest starts growing exponentially larger over the course of several weeks, which would be exactly consistent with what I just said. So therefore, did I make it up? Or what the hell are you actually seeing happening before you? Are you beholding? Are you realizing what you're beholding? Or videos of this has been shown, as it goes on to state here, to people who are stunned. I have the video still. It's on one of my laptops right now that's sitting on my kitchen floor. Broken. That computer's half damaged, actually, sadly, and I'm trying to get it restored. No help, though, you see. We'll continue. They would react with a reaction of, how the hell is this even possible? I've never even seen anything that shocking anywhere in existence. And how wasn't this enough to get doctors to recognize and treat the issues? Is this system actually sick and dysfunctional if it's allowing something like this to happen? Continuing onwards, I proceeded to use thermal camera imaging to show positive indication of the issues that are affecting the rib cage. Genuinely, even though the mention of this was just ignored by doctors, since although it's scientifically valid in life, in actual objective reality, as strong evidence, it isn't a certified medical instrument, so I don't know. Meanwhile, as it continues on, normal imaging tests without using any tracer fluids are unable to pick up sufficient features on the rendering to conclusively find anything. Then doctors unfortunately take the absence of evidence on these tests of limited usefulness or applicability within context, and they falsely cause this they believe that this indicates evidence of absence, going against, of course, that long-held rule that everyone knows. You go to school and you learn this. Absence of evidence does not equate to or confer evidence or imply evidence of absence. But they forget. They treat you as if it is absent. It's very interesting. The issue, as it goes on to state, got worse, sadly still. Really, it did. By about 4 or more years ago already now, a hole started opening up on the anterior side of the very top of my own throat, tucked adjacent to the nasal cavities, but opening up an entire other section that should not be possible. Over time, it slowly but eventually became more and more apparent that fluids, upon being swallowed, would divert in part from running down the esophagus in its entirety, which it should, but instead some of it would directly, as a result of the swallowing pressure, that momentary extreme positive pressure, shoots it through the hole directly into my cranial cavity. Unbelievable, I know. Trust me. Continuing onwards, goes on to state that concurrently, since about 2018 or so, I started developing neurological symptoms, difficulty walking, difficulty speaking, along with other neurocognitive deficits that onset immediately, each of which people noticed would tend to onset and get suddenly worse directly after eating and swallowing, particularly if what it was being consumed was tea or coffee. Funny, how coincidental, right? Eventually, the signs of genuine effusion of food and fluid emboli into my cranial cavity became overwhelming. Many of them are covered much more extensively within other YouTube videos of mine within my own channel, here. One of them involving one of the signs, that is, involving concern. I've posted about this. I've put on Craigslist multiple times looking for help, to pay people to help me. Still nothing came of it. Unbelievable. One of them involving both using family funds even. I don't even have anything technically to my name, hardly, unfortunately, given where I am in life as a result of everything that's happened. That's right. Now, as it states here, one of them, those signs involving both conspicuous temperature changes that others were able to both record via FLIR imaging, as well as even feel with their hands, things that should be impossible to feel, things that, I remember, the deeper details are available on other videos on this channel, which are remarkable. cause people to be astonished and in shock. It's impossible. What they felt was like, that should be impossible, and I'm feeling it now. That literally their fingers and their nervous system is telling them what's going on. Like, oh my God, I'm literally witnessing the truth right now. What you're saying? Oh my God, and they start screaming, oh my God. You get it? They called strongly for every imaginable person to help wake the medical establishment up so that the proper custom test can be implemented in order to essentially save my life and at least have me get a chance at restoring the quality of life that I live with, that I don't live with now. As a side note, furthermore here, as others around me have witnessed, I have, since the coma in 2016, also, and very interestingly as well, too, developed a somewhat extreme and very unique case of what's called medically acquired savant syndrome. Go check out very interesting, there's at least several good YouTube videos about it. It's a real syndrome, extremely rare, almost always hits people after comas. I'm one of the cases, not formally diagnosed, but I am one of the cases, and one of the most extreme kinds. Extremely interesting stuff. Go check it out on your side time if you like. Resuming and proceeding onwards from here. 4 years. Not only has both my IQ and also my insight, as well as my emotional intelligence, shot up through the roof, but my senses too all became extremely sharpened, very far beyond normal human capability. I gained the ability to smell plastic, for example, from up to dozens of yards away in even small amounts, particularly if it's I have to be downwind from it, where furthermore I can determine what number or type of plastic it is according to the number on the bottom within the triangle arrows. This is most particularly true. It stayed true very strongly and clearly for about 2 years onwards. Then there's a little bit of a side story. I didn't put this in writing here formally, but I started drinking heavier coffee, or I found that coffee use ended up being the only thing that would re-regulate very partially and recorrect very partially this extreme neural deficit of mine back towards one end, but it would introduce other different neural problems. And then when I try to get off of drinking coffee, I'd re-normalize in one way while reintroducing other non-normal things the other way. So no matter what I do, I'm screwed. I live between a rock and a hard place in that sense, genuinely. But regardless, returning now to the matter here and continuing onwards, furthermore states here that I can furthermore smell extreme amounts of information coming from people. And this is absolutely, completely, mind-blowingly real and very true. I can smell their gender, their ethnicity, what their emotional state is, how that emotional state changes in lifetime in response to any stimuli. I can smell, in essence, basically, whether you're a good or a bad person, and basically, I can smell who you are as a human being. And you couldn't believe it. I'm telling you. When you upregulate the receptors responsible for this, well, look at the animals. We say, oh, they're the animals in the animal state. Well, we know they all have a great sense of smell. Why do you think that is? Get it? Very real, too. Most mammals enjoy these privileges. It's hardwired into our DNA, even though some of it's deactivated or epigenetically becomes deactivated slowly. Oh, just reactivate it. Now you got it. I'm an extremely unique and extremely interesting case. Already, just on this, and I haven't even gotten started here. We continue. For the first few years, I could see extreme detail of things, up to nearly a mile away or more. I could hear with audibly and track multiple conversations around me, even those being whispered from quite a distance away. I've demonstrated this to family members with their subsequent astonishment resulting. Many other cool tricks and powers too I took on, some of which are even hard to describe or demonstrate, as it almost kind of transcends an easy explanation. But, for example, I can feel just by touch whether fruit is organic or not. And for a few years following the coma, I retained the ability to even feel without contact. Although now it's slightly more difficult to do this. Very slowly my powers are fading away, but like over the course of years and years, they'll fade away only very slightly and then very slightly still. Much of which I still retain that's beyond human capability. Likely as a result of the overall coffee consumption and you know, the long-term effect of that too, you see. I could feel the quality of the fruit by, as it goes on to say it here, standing within a few feet away. I could feel it over the ether, through the air, or the broadcast signal, in essence, from the fruit. I could feel whether it's that of the organic fruit or that of the conventional fruit. And I reliably tell you, people have seen this and they've been shocked. And then, funny enough, and we have some stories, they blindfold me and all this, then they try to trick me. And then, out of my confusion, the natural answer I gave exposed and was in conjunction with the fact that they did trick me, which then had her realize, oh my God, you could have only said that if this was real, because you actually, that bitch lost her fucking mind after that. This is real. I should be having people follow me with fucking cameras. And actually, eventually, I had one guy write to me who found out about my case, just a part of it, and said, listen, I'm a science reporter. I want to follow you around with a fucking camera. You get it? We're at that level. Or again, I'm still here, stuck. You're not understanding. We continue. The neurological changes that have onset onto me as a combined result of the coma, with also what the nature of the modulation was that the catalyzing supplements or drugs induced or effectuated, have led me to become, very arguably so, the greatest case of acquired savant syndrome within all of human history. I spent years developing not just my knowledge, but my wisdom. My insights reached a point because with, let me put it this way to you, what people have kind of come to observe about me, my learning curve is what you could consider to be some of the greatest of all time that people have seen. I'm at the level where you could put me into a domain where by knowledge-wise, I don't know anything. If you have me read 20 minutes worth of a textbook in that field, the resulting interconnections that get formed cause me to become as smart as someone who had the course for a year, and that's in that subject. If you have me read 3/4 of the whole textbook, from that I'll net meta into it, all the superimposed stacks. I become almost as smart as the professor. A couple months researching this stuff, I'm the one literally forming new theories in the field that others turn to me and say, oh my God, how did you figure that out? Well, you're welcome too. We continue. My insights as they eventually turned into law, as a practical matter, I ended up having to be a litigant suing hospitals for some other nonsense. My insights reached the point where I could reliably analyze case law from any lower court of the U.S. up to that case law issuing from even the U.S. Supreme Court, and identify flaws in their legal reasoning that even they themselves missed, astonishingly. Hint to everybody who might be interested, you'd be surprised to learn that a much higher proportion of current case law constitutes bad law than what even most lawyers and judges themselves can readily appreciate, let alone the people. That is, poorly reasoned arguments or untenable law or conclusions by propriety. That is, in other words, you're all living in a clown world legally, structure-wise, and don't even know it. Continuing. Further Bible study had affirmed the incredible wisdom of God present in life, this universe, as revealed through his best prophets throughout their respective ages. That the same wisdom of God that I myself became attuned and connected to upon waking up from the coma, where most people today unfortunately miss the beauty of it. Sadly, you could flip through the book, you won't see much. I don't know, it's just a bunch of words. I'm telling you, it is the most substance-dense, energetically dense material in the world that I've ever seen thus far, and I read through a lot. You don't have the neural wiring into your mind, through your mind, running through your mind and eyes to be able to catch it. But if you have someone who can interlink it all, I am telling you, it is valid. Ooh, you will be falling on your knees soon, I feel. For ironically, as it goes on to state here, truly, I was barely agnostic, realistically speaking. You know, I was like a spiritual, quote unquote, despite having like somewhat of a Judeo-Christian upbringing, somewhat, even superficially. I continue on. This was the case, barely agnostic at the functional or practical level during the prior years leading up to the coma. Since that time, a few people in particular have come to help me, even flying in from across the world, in order to give their support and help fight for ultimate recognition of this situation of mine and for proper management of it by the current system. My insights have allowed me to determine exactly what was wrong with their current medical establishment's current medical approach, or the lack of it, or the poorly designed aspect of it, involving my own heretofore undiagnosed condition. I turned to the most advanced AI program publicly available. Furthermore, the same class of AI used by doctors and hospitals to prompt doctors with leading insights on what may accurately be going on. As a side note, I featured the entirety of that AI's analysis on my YouTube channel under another video. It's available for view. It's a few hours long, but one can go and enjoy it. I'm not kidding around, where we'll cover what it says in a moment with, as it resumes to stay here. I stayed here with a patient. One could find out what's going on with the patient in order to evaluate the probability that there's a genuine case of such gastric tears throughout my GI tract, as I have claimed, as weighed against the possibility of it being some kind of delusion or mistake or schizophrenia or misunderstanding, which sadly, I'll state here, as a small portion of those who are relatively much less acquainted with the reality of my situation and the relevant material and the understanding of it, such people summarily included that which I'm reporting or experiencing can't be genuine, surely. It must therefore be just some fabrication, some sickness, eh? No. Furthermore, the AI program, once getting all the facts and processing everything, and further asked questions and argued back and forth about particular points, and then it reassess its understanding, that AI program concluded with a greater than 90% probability that in real life right now there are long-lasting untreated genuine perforations within this very person and patient that have gone untreated and undiagnosed thus far. That is, well, you know, it really is. Continuing onwards from thereafter it states that those who remain still while being aware of this fact become naturally complicit, for they have simply allowed, by their choice of passivity, the issue to persist and remain for longer than necessary, taking away from a human being's life where they were able to help, but they didn't. Almost all of those people who have read the 1,000 plus pages of my own writings on just the matters of my conditions, I am a first of its case kind on the planet, have even flown in from literally across the world, from Russia, literally to convey strongly, literally for the purpose of coming here to convey strongly, among other things to do as well, to convey to other family members that given all the evidence and extremely strong cross-validation and consistency, these are people with high-level engineering degrees and a good brain too in that department. They analyzed everything, described and analyzed. They said there's no chance that the issues are based on any nerve-based hallucinations or any psychiatric delusions. No. They'd say, no, your son has a real problem. Why are you just sitting here this whole time acting like you have nothing serious to worry about, that you have to start running now, moving out of concern, knocking on everybody's doors, help, help. After approximately a year or two of fluids entering into the cranial cavity, the situation by 2021 got worse, where eventually brain matter began to, in limited amounts, start dripping out from the hole for the first time ever. It took that long for an eventual and progressive loss of structural integrity to allow this to even begin to happen. Though in hindsight, no surprise that it eventually did. It was just a matter of time. The center of gravity of my skull correspondingly, the contents and weights correspondingly began to change extremely noticeably, naturally, as a result. Still, no doctors and no hospitals were willing to help in any way beyond normal testing, because the claim, of course, on the face of it sounds nuts. So they're trained when someone walks into an ER going, "Oh, I think I'm eating my brain. I think I'm spitting out pieces of my brain." They're trained to think that 99.998% of cases out of the, oh my God, 99.998 cases out of every 100 will be that guy's out of his fucking mind. You understand? On the face of it, they're trained to think that is just a mental sickness. That's going to get a psychiatric confinement. You understand? Continuing on. These are factors that affect how one in my position is able to practically manage this situation as well. You understand some of the practical constraints, which means you have to go through outpatient routes mostly to get everything taken care of, which is very doable if you're working with a competent system. But then there's other shortcomings as well, which we'll come to understand shortly. But for now, resuming, additionally, as it goes on to state here, 2 other events during the year 2021 led up to this, what we just have considered and beheld as happening here. Firstly, by about that spring, contact with an adverse agent caused, after accidental swallowing, in essence, sudden split brain syndrome to onset. As a result of the damage similar to what caused my gastric perforations to be able to rip open. In essence, it's tissue saturation that causes brittleization of tissues. That's atypical, but in medicine with certain compounds, in fact, the same ones that I'm dealing with in my case, I would say. You could look it up and see the exact studies. It's already medically known that these are associated with gastrointestinal tears, and I've shown the studies to doctors. They're brain dead. Help. Do you understand? It caused split brain syndrome to onset, where I since then have not been able to verbalize things presented to my left eye. Yeah. Imagine that. Other features and symptoms also manifested, a few of which were very noticeable to people around me, involving manifestations of the split brain syndrome. There's talents that one takes on, in essence, that I took on as well, ones that all normal human beings are simply unable themselves to do, which is one way of being able to genuinely ascertain whether this is a case of split brain syndrome. There's no case of split brain syndrome that occurs without surgical intervention, which is what they used to do decades ago. They don't do it so much anymore. Besides that, only cases of very substantial trauma can even begin to have something cause the corpus callosum to either rip off through trauma or to brittleize such that it rips apart, like flaking apart. Additionally, that same season, during the riots of 2021 in New York, I was kindly attacked from behind with glass bottles and haymakers to the skull while passing through the park one night, landing me within a hospital with police involved. Remember, the hospital people there, the officers in particular, beheld how the apparently resulting brain damage to the one side of my head, brain, nervous system that set on even on top of everything I was already dealing with, which they didn't even know about. This caused an inability right in front of them. They even saw this and were like, oh my God, holy crap, holy shit. I couldn't even write with one hand while I was there in the hospital. Fucking bloodied head, half fucking impacted in. Couldn't write with my dominant hand, which that lasted for some time, in fact. And not just that, but furthermore, all these cumulative effects suddenly caused my functionality to become even lower overall. My then girlfriend at the time, as a side note, she noticed, because she was with me over the course of that time. For the first few months before this happened, she was like, you have a lot of deficits, but you have an amazing ability to overcome those deficits, and you still stay on top of a lot of things, and you're still somehow more productive than most other human beings I know. And then afterwards, she started telling people, oh my God, it's like 2 different people. Not personality-wise, although mind you, as a side note, people have noticed that personality-wise, after the coma, I've become noticeably different in essence. But rather, by capability of what I was able to do and take on, even that girl noticed. For the few months afterwards, during 2021, she's like, you're like way, way less like functional. You were not functional before, but you kind of had your way of making up for it and staying. You overcompensated in some way, such that you were still robust somewhat. Now it's like it's even the robustness is it's like the damage is accrued to being too much now. It's too much. So as this was stating, all these cumulative effects suddenly caused my functionality to become even lower. I was much less able right after that spring and summer to 2021. Then it was like almost night and day worse. Wasn't able to get things done. Much less so, in fact, than I was able to before. Though, as it continues to state, even then, even before, between 2016 and 2021, I still had the issues that involve GABA receptor modulation. And I want you to consider this. Another side note, and I didn't write the details of this down, but consider this. I want people to understand what it is to be affected with precisely the specific interactive result that came from the coma with the GABA subreceptor type upregulation. It's extremely uncommon. In fact, it's so uncommon they already published one study about me. This isn't normal. So you know how, let's say in psychiatry or psychology, you have people have certain tendencies and you could classify them into certain types, and they're based on similar patterns. So you could say, oh, this is this type of this cluster of personality with this subtype and this. So you have the same types of tendencies, right? I'm sort of a completely new category. Okay? But as I've described in other videos, including one particular video, I also highly recommend you check it out. It's on my channel. I uploaded a conversation I had with ChatGPT. That one's only 1 hour long, where it's titled The Visionary, where it discusses some of the ironic caveats between high-level meditated monks who are able to channel and really see the universe for what it is, but as a result, because the mind, the brain, and the nervous system reallocates the electrical energy and activity and input away from your dopamine-based mechanistic functionalities, such as, I can get up and run and clean my room right now in 5 minutes, those types, to being able to see, like, I could see the universe, I can see high-level logic, I can dictate with my mouth. If you put a microphone next to my mouth, I'll dictate to you the deepest secrets of the universe, and it will form a novel and a book with high insights that you could write about, or publish. But that same guy won't be able to get up, and he's not good for nothing. You leave him in charge of the kitchen, he could be in charge in so much as he'll tell you what to do, and it'll be the best run kitchen in the world. But if you have him be the cook, he's going to drop the pot every time and fuck everything up and mess up everybody's flow around him. He's not good for that. You understand? He's going to overlook the crud on his face that hasn't been washed off for 3 months because his nervous system keeps taking him away from that, because he's in the high realms of the universe, and how 18% higher, making it up, percentage of U.S. Supreme Law cases are mismanaged for the reason of this particular legal insight, which 99 out of 100 people couldn't fathom up to that level. But he can't wash the crud off his face. These are the ironies we're talking about. I discussed this a little bit more in some of the other videos I've posted and shared with friends too, you see, as a message of like, hey, this is my way and my words to signal to you what it is that's really going on here. I think you guys had better wake up. Some of you who aren't woken up. Now, continuing. Here's the best way I could describe it, though, because what I said now is understandable, but it still sounds dysfunctional in the way that isn't fully intuitive. I'll tell you right now how it is intuitive. Just understand this. All of you, virtually all of you out there in the world, you've had your party nights, you've been drunk, you drink alcohol. I used to quite a bit for a while. I don't anymore. I'm sober for years now, and I actually like it better this way, genuinely. But imagine being completely drunk. Now, I'll tell you something about ethanol or alcohol. Most people don't know this, but ethanol is a GABA A receptor subtype agonist, which means that it activates the GABA A receptor within your GABA framework, generally speaking, that's within your central nervous system. That's the thing that causes you to have the anxiety relief. That's why they call alcohol liquid courage. It's liquid courage because it works on GABA A. Now, when you have too much GABA A oversaturation, what happens? Your respiratory rate goes down. Oh, look, mine has been low, didn't I say? Keep in mind, it's a slightly different subreceptor, not A. If it were GABA A that would happen for me, I would have lost consciousness and died. But because it's a different one, I live with the low activation while still conscious. That's a distinctly different thing that allows this to take place, you see. I am genuinely, neurologically, and medically, and in every conceivable way, I'm an extremely unique case. So listen up. Imagine if you were as drunk as you ever were, but let's say that you were permanently surgically strapped to an IV that chronically dripped the beer and vodka into your veins directly, such that you had no ability to ever detach it. You're forced to have it run 24/7. Where, let's say, magically, as a second consideration, we could wave a wand over you and just and make it so that your nervous system is unable to even attempt to maintain homeostasis, which it does by allowing tolerance to onset through down-regulation of the specific receptors, that GABA A in particular in the case of alcohol. Let's say that facet of your system and regulation is also disabled. So I don't have to actually put double the amount of alcohol every several days or a few weeks to keep the game up. I could just keep the same rate going, and let's just say it has the same effect on you, to keep it simplistic. Okay. All right, I have the gurney stripped up. It's stripped into your IV in your arm. It's all tape wrapped in your handcuff. You just can't get it off. It's permanently affixed to you. It's running forever, and a little gremlin's following you, and they're constantly swapping out the alcohol. You have no choice. But everything besides that, go ahead, go live your life. How is it? What's the first thing you're doing? Can you ever drive again? No. Not only because of the legal fact, but let's say it were legal to drive, no, you'd still be a mess. You'd kill a few people within a few days, and then you're just like, no, I can't keep doing this. Okay. Now, what else is going on? I mean, the drunkest you've ever been. So let's say the highest GABA A saturation has ever been. That was when you were passed out that one time by the bar, remember? Yeah, I'm talking to you, listener. Remember, let's say when you were stooped over the chair? Yeah, remember when that bum came and took pissed on your leg at that same time? Did you care about the piss? Or did you lay in it because it didn't really matter to you? You see? There's different priorities that the GABA overwhelmed mind naturally takes on. Your instinct changes as a result. If we could hypothesize your mind to be a three-way opposing geometric balancing scale, kind of like rock, paper, scissors is a set of three-way opposites. Well, your brain sort of works the same way. You have serotonin, dopamine, and GABA as your three primary colors, in a sense, neurologically wise. Most people don't know. It's a little more nuanced and complicated beyond there, but in an overly simplistic way, but one that still works as a general truth. There's your main three. When you start tipping GABA one way, or start drinking alcohol a lot, you are a different person when you're drunk, aren't you? That's exactly why you drink it. But now mind you, what's going to happen to your personality? On the one hand, certain things within the world aren't going to matter to you as much. So what's going to happen is that, for example, if you had someone shit on your leg, you'd just be like, oh, what's all that shit on my leg? But then really you won't care. You'll just still kind of roll around in the shit anyway. And then other things have your attention. Right. If you were sober, the anxiety that naturally comes in because you have someone's shit on your leg, you would run. You'd run. Nothing would be able to, I couldn't pay you enough money to not run. But when you're drunk, I couldn't pay you enough money to stay focused on the job of actually caring enough to change your clothes. That's what I live in permanently without being able to help to get my way out of it. Do you understand? I need help. It's not by choice. I'm not on drugs. I have a problem. I'm not aligned such that I'm self-reliant, because if you GABA overwhelm somebody, he becomes the oracle, but that oracle needs people around him to help prop him up. While you're in that drunk state, furthermore, I'd say, certain things you do become more interested in. So you see, certain things you'll become less interested in, but certain things more. For example, let's say your friend pisses you off while you're drunk. Well, when you're not drunk, you'll let it roll off your back. But when you're drunk, what happens? You'll run down to that guy's house and pound on it for 5 hours straight. You see the difference? Different things matter to the over GABA-ergically whelmed neural framework. I'm in that position. I have the ethanol strapped to my arm, except it's invisible. That's just, I'm living with the natural consequence of what happened to me after the coma affected my brain and reset my brain, while the apparently other GABA active supplements that I took, the nootropic drugs, really in essence, were potentiating each other to a level never before recorded in human history that caused the coma to onset. And that's never happened with any GABA B substance ever before to that point. Not in the way my specific case happened. And for 7 years, nobody's helped me. Not sufficiently. I've been making videos on my damn channel telling people, help me, SOS. I'm going to go to one of them right now. Here's a video I posted almost 2 years ago. Fucking 22 months ago. This has been sitting public. It has only 94 views. This is why I'm screwed. I need 94 million views. MRI needed now to save life. As it went on here to state. Half an hour only.
In 2016, I would end up in a coma. Following a medically unprecedented...
Yeah. And I went on. And then I showed how in the middle here, they actually missed the signs that the perforation was real. And they just fucking missed it.
Furthermore, as lungs normally...
They're fucking idiots. Continuing. Then I have to make videos like this, because you people still aren't getting it. Showing everything plainly. Teaching you people. So that you could even begin to dream to fucking come to understand what the hell it is that I'm telling you. And on, I skip ahead further. And the answer is no, for reasons that are very critical. No one in the medical industry appreciates this stuff. I have to do the thinking for you. The fucking hell. This was also 2 years ago, year and a half ago. What the hell are you slow people doing? It is a risky combination. And yet every idiot I go to, oh, let's just put in gastrografin. No, you brainless sheep. Be quiet. I don't want neurotoxicity, you get it? And it's better too. Always listen to me, in other words, and you'll get it right. Safer, you see. Always have to correct the idiots who would otherwise harm you if you just let them do the work the way they want to. Continuing. Here's another angle of my brain. I wish I had a better resolution camera. It's not cheese, it's not fake. In fact, I hadn't been eating anything, and phlegm doesn't do that. Brain. It's not a joke. I'm not going to evidence this now, but I have plenty of stories that had people don't even realize I wasn't kidding. Go to a restaurant and eat pig brain for once in your life at a Chinese restaurant downtown Chinatown. Feel what it tastes like. Huh. And the next time you taste it and feel that smell, you're extremely unique. Ah, what is this? Ah. Moving on. Before I decided to rely on MRI imaging exclusively, I was thinking, God, could they help me with a regular CT-based or radiograph-based approach? If so, that's worth making another video to teach these people. Do your jobs correctly. Never mind the form of what you think your job is. Your substantive job is to save the human being who has concern. Learn. Learn. Damn it. Teach how to position the patient. Why do I have to teach you how to position the patient? Because I'm going into your damn imaging centers, into hospitals, and the fucking radiologist who has the MD license is telling me he doesn't know how to get the patient into the proper position. Are you retarded? Skipping ahead, showing you exactly why the evidence I've accumulated so far indicates to more MD radiologists who don't know how to do their work and understand anything within context. That's exactly what you would see if there was a pathological situation. Look, they're fucking idiots, brain dead. I've been showing this to people all around me. You're all asleep. Wake up. Continuing. And just skimming through naturally. Teaching. So that someone would damn learn something, what you would expect, what's diagnostic. That's how it would look like. Know what to look for. Figure it out, slow people. It's my life. Does it have value? All of these are on my channel. And this is what I want. It's on the screen now. You're looking at it. It already exists. That's the test I want. I found it already, and I'm hunting it with every fiber of my being. Help me. A year and a half, your prayers have not yet been answered, people. I turned to my friends to send them this message through this. This was over a year ago.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I believe it's not too late. Together we can change the world. Lay the puzzle pieces out. Find out what it's all about. Together we can change the world. Can't do it by myself, so I'm asking for your help. Together we can change the world. Silk has where it's been shining. Roll your sleeves up, let's get started. Together we can change the world. Together we can change the world. With our hands and with our hearts, we can dare to make a start. Together we can change the world. What if we spoke with one voice, knowing that we have a choice? Together we can change the world.
And I even offered to pay you fucking brain dead idiots to help.
Together we can change the world. Silk has where it's been shining. Roll your sleeves up, let's get started. Together we can change the world. Together we can change the world. Change your mind and change your life. Set aside the fear and strife. Together we can change the world. When we open up our eyes and we start to realize, together we can change the world. Change your mind. Can do it by myself. So I'm asking for your change the world. Together we can change the world.
You know what I get instead? Family and a mother who turns her back on me, in essence, even more after that. Where I ended up having to post 53 videos within a playlist, all available publicly on my channel, teaching a apparent narcissistic, apparent cluster B woman, trait-bearing woman, to come around to understand what the hell it is that constitutes right and wrong in this universe. Remember, sickness is self-reinforcing. Parasites don't love to kill themselves because they're parasites. Even a parasite is the same like you. It too wants to live. Emotional parasites, that is cluster B, trait-bearing people, are the ultimate enemy of this world. And this is one of my final and largest doctrines that I'm going to be unveiling unto all of mankind, God willing, soon enough. There's other people and other portions of perhaps philosophy and even theology, interestingly enough, that actually very articulatedly converge upon that truth. Resuming back here. All these cumulative effects, as I was saying, suddenly caused my functionality to become even lower. I was much less able to get things done. No surprise. That's why the SOS video came out. I may sound angry now. I wasn't necessarily angry this whole time. I was very different before. Not as traumatized, in essence, you see. Not as let down by people. I believed still. Perhaps I still believe, which is why I'm even bothering to make these videos, but regardless, it's still a matter of principle. And all of this too, as it applies properly within context to all the situations that it applies on. But for now, we stay focused on what the general narrative is here for my life. So imagine living your life that way, where you couldn't get out from the beer and vodka IV strapped to you forever. That's something like what I live with. Imagine people come up to you and say, hey, why does your place look like a mess? But can't you do anything? Why haven't you written that essay? Why haven't you put that in? You're like, dude, the world is spinning around me 24/7 practically. You're not getting it. They don't hire drunk people to work drunk, ever, in any job. Okay? I'm drunk while standing straight, chronically forever. Can someone help me? It's a GABA receptor. It's documented already on me. Do something. It's never been a case of this kind, but it's affecting my life. Hell, care is the fuel that does it. If your heart is empty, your legs will be empty of weight too, because you won't want to carry any. Continuing onwards finally. Now, despite all of this, the one thing I could still do is think. I can use my mind, I can use my fingers and type with a phone, and oftentimes I can use my voice as well, including now. And thankfully it's become a slightly less strenuous of an issue now, I'd say within the last several weeks, couple months or so, than it was several months ago, a year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. That is one tiny bit of hope. Slightly better in some ways, limited ways, and then some things worse. Continuing, I can use my voice. Use of my body is still available to me, though this isn't always a constant, as I've discussed before. Intermittent, in and out. I use my intelligence and insights to design a new alternative MRI protocol for reliably scanning and detecting the kind of issue that I have, which uses pineapple juice as an effective tracer fluid for this purpose. You saw the image of that just a little earlier in what was featured in one of those videos, where, furthermore, the juice appears bright white on MRI scans. This is already, I didn't invent that part, that's already known. I just put pre-invented concepts together in a unique way, you see. Whereas it goes on to state here, other specific settings on protocols that already exist as well, in and of themselves, that are on the MRI machines can be used or are used in conjunction with the pineapple juice to purposely darken the rest of the tissues and fluids of the human body that are presented to the magnetic resonance scanning field, while the pineapple juice only stays bright white. Then you could see where it's going and where it's accumulating. I wrote over 100 pages and started sending this to people close to me within the last 3 to 6 months. Stay tuned to find out how much I heard back from people who were supposed to be my closest stakeholders in my life regarding any of that. Human nature is some of the most disgusting things I've ever seen in my life. We continue. As it goes on to state here, I've approached various MRI, and you all should be ashamed of yourselves, those of you who are in a position to help and you haven't, so to the point that people are complaining about you to your face, that you have caused someone concern and displeasure improperly within the context. It's not merited and not warranted and not right. Continuing, stating here, resuming right now. As it goes on to state here, I've approached various MRI centers, yet no radiologist desires to even consider implementing the procedure I invented. It's essentially because of this, so far, that I remain stuck. Reasonably, I've reached out to friends and family to try to help me on this matter, not just recently now, but for years worth of time already. I've ultimately received insufficient help by far, thus up to this point. And before I proceed on to the next section, involving what my lifelong friend Anthony's role within the course of events and narrative have been here, let me just kind of consider let's consider what some of my medical records even have about me, and otherwise how my life is basically summarized for the last few years.
could lead this life. Well, you don't work for me.
No scenario. I see every scenario. I see 50 scenarios. That's what it does, Carl. It puts me 50 moves ahead of you. Worth the risk. What would you do?
No.
Speak English?
Yes.
Take me to the hospital now.
It is estimated most human beings only use 10% of the brain's capacity. Imagine if we could access 100%. Interesting things begin to happen. Yes?
Professor Norman, my name's Lucy. I just read all your research on the human brain. It's a little rudimentary, but you're on the right track.
Thank you.
I can feel every living thing.
Since when did you start writing Chinese?
Since an hour ago.
What happens when she reaches 100%? I have no idea.
After you, Senator. Thanks for stopping by, Carl. Give us a second. What are you doing? Do you want to be president of the United States or brain dead, stuck full of tubes?
I'll take my chances.
I told you, your chances don't exist.
See, once you know what's in it, you can tweak it, re-engineer it, get the bugs out, taper off. I'm off it, Carl.
Well, on it or off it, there's no scenario where you're not working for me.
How are you going to pay me? In cigarettes? And trust me when I say this, I'm not even being creative.
There's no way you can be making accusations like that and be walking around alive.
That you would even think that shows me how unprepared you are to fight me.
You're no longer equipped to
I
fight
may be off,
me.
but you think I didn't learn anything? That my synapses didn't change? That I kept absolutely nothing?
You have no idea what kind of enemy I am.
That van's going to rear in that taxi.
What?
The driver's distracted. He's texting. He's going 30 miles an hour. He's 60 feet to stop. He doesn't have room.
What van?
I see everything, Carl. I'm 50 moves ahead of you and everybody else. What makes you think I don't have a guy with a beat on you right now? How do you know you're going to be alive this time next year?
What do you do? What do you do?
Something's pumping at half mass in there. Walls of your heart are dilated. Aortic valve stenosis. You're going to need to get that replaced. But you already knew that.
Maybe we should cool off, talk again.
All this knowledge, you can unlock secrets that go beyond our universe. I'm not even sure that mankind is ready for that.
It's like all things that make me human are fading away.
Greatest lesson in human history. That of the story of the biblical King David and the spider.
It's a business spider. They been trying to watch the spider out. I got spiders crawling out your mouth.
We got the medical report.
I stay in another dimension. Fear is non-existent. Suit up and swing through the city. I'm wide awake. Be very afraid. I'm in my own world. Give me space. I'm in my own universe. I'm focused, I'm chosen, I'm golden, I'm stronger, on missions, ain't no folder, a soldier, my vision, persistent, I took the game, it's over, I made a name, it's global, my enemy, pass over, I took it way to the top, I had to learn to be smart, I had to move with my heart, keeping my eyes on the part, physically evil and dark, when it comes to my opponents, I know how to beat them, I know to defeat them, living my life by the moment, somebody calling, somebody gon' need me, just came to my senses, I stay in another dimension. Fear is non-existent. Suit up and swing through the city. I'm not late. I'm wide awake. Be very afraid. I'm in my own world. Give me space. I'm in my own universe. Give me space. Okay, we bounce and shake. We rollin' rock. I gotta set it straight. The block is hot. Something's come over me, I hit a lot. And tell my enemies, I'll never stop. No, no, nothing can shake me now. Tell the block I made it now. Yeah, the whole town is talking now. I swear nothing can stop me now. All this boosting up my senses. I won't stop, but I finish. I shoot my shot, but I won't miss it. Only way to go is go the distance. Nothing can shake me now. Nothing can break me down. Tell the whole town we poppin' now. Nothing can shake me now. This is unbelievable.
Welcome to Spider Society.
Regarding Anthony's role within the narrative. Katya, as mentioned earlier, naturally urged me to get as many people who are as close to me to become aware of the issue so that they can, out of natural concern, arise and offer themselves to help in any way that they possibly can. I should have added here in writing. I reached out to Anthony. I started sending him some of the materials regarding what was going on with his old close friend, one of his best friends growing up. He failed to read these things initially, and even after a few months, although he read much of what was sent to him, he still hadn't read a significant portion, nor did he seem to even care about what was there remaining left to read. So as it goes on to state here, he didn't bother to read it, and instead starts essentially attacking me for little more than me asking and wondering why he hasn't even cared to finish this thing that should be of important concern to him. If I'm his friend, that is. Continuing on other similar related occasions when I'd call him to discuss the matters or anything important generally, over the years, he'd simply fail to call back multiple times, beyond what most people would consider with a reasonable time having elapsed thereby. Then, when he would behold one in my position reasonably raise concern about this, after multiple calls, he simply gets mad at me, essentially reversing the frame or trying to, and accuses me of somehow being essentially out of line purportedly. What? Continuing on, about a year or two later, he learned that my issue still hadn't become resolved, of course. It can only be resolved once you all pass God's test. Get it? Which is, he hurts me, and then watches all of you to see if you're doing the right thing. You understand? That should be pretty clear. That is how God works. And after all, such things can only be resolved once there's a sufficient involvement of people, a sufficient involvement on this matter by other people. Exactly right. Continuing. Anthony then got to meet my new at the time then girlfriend at this point in time in my life now, who also was closely involved and became so shortly after we got together. And she was very concerned, and she was supportive of me getting more people involved such that there'd be sufficient power and support on the matter to secure the result that we are striving for, that we care for and care about to obtain. Continuing on. Eventually people go in and out of life. Eventually one day then, about a year ago now, or a little more now from the time of this recording, in very early 2024, which is going to be my year. I promise you. That's prophecy. Just watch. My own mother, as it goes on to state here, who multiple other people unfortunately do agree with me in our opinion that there may be something essentially wrong with her, and more is on my channel involving why that is to more fully explain, to not just leave a conclusory statement here without substantiation available to anyone who's interested. Proceeding on, she actually calls the police and essentially lies or misrepresents, misleads them stating misrepresentative things to them and to the subsequent hospital that I was taken to as well, in order to have me psychiatrically confined against my will, where both the calling for police and her subsequent actions were determined by Anthony as a moral witness, as an essential moral witness to that matter, as he ended up becoming, that she in fact indeed had no apparent valid ground or reason to do either of those two things within context. So there's a little bit of a somewhat of a substantially significant going on in my life, an issue. Proceeds onward to state here that for years she's been essentially the only person close to me who, unlike most others close to me, believed that virtually nothing. She believed virtually nothing except that there must be something psychiatrically wrong with me, given all of the issues that we've discussed here earlier, despite the tremendous amount of evidence to the contrary. Continuing onwards here. Others who even flew in from across the world to convince her otherwise. And Anthony was here for that too, as the third person with me here on that, talking to my mom on that day. I remember that woman, she was ignored, and she had no successful effect. That was Katya, of course. Therefore, she tries now, that is my mother, tries now to simply provoke any reason or situation possible to force me into positions where I'm confined against my will. This was the fourth such time. Each time they observe me, and then they eventually release me, as they find that it's improper to hold me, to continue to hold me thereafter under suspicion of being a harm to myself or anyone else by their own observations, because no such thing becomes apparent to them, but the opposite. Very sad stuff. But it's all a test for humanity to see what karmic jurisdictions will you be granting me in the spirit realm, so to speak. That's how you lose your power and give it away to other people. Never find yourselves becoming guilty of anything, because that is how you truly do lose. Now, continuing on here as it goes on to state, as a result, on top of everything else that I'm dealing with, I now am essentially estranged from my own mother, effectively, for over a year now, both for the reason that I'm validly mad at her for things that others do agree with were her own fault, as it was her own wrongdoing, but also for the reason that she continues to unrelentlessly try to reverse the frame even this far out a year later by playing as the offended one. See? Human nature. Funny, isn't it? Where she continues on to essentially reject her own son, embarrassingly and shamefully enough, where she furthermore refuses to properly reapproach me under the realization that she may have messed up, as others agree that she has. For one, as it continues to stay here, in my kind of health position, is such a thing as this a fair, moral, or normal, an empathic, or emotionally healthy thing to do for one in her position as a mother to her own son? Continuing on now, regarding Anthony's involvement as a moral witness on this specific matter, as we're starting to cover more of the recent events. Anthony still technically has remained as one of the closest people to me in life, given that we grew up together, and we've always remained in touch, regardless of whether regularly or just on occasion. We'd usually have a long-term pattern of reorbiting back into each other's lives here and there. Strangely, and actually not for the first time, the mother within this circumstance now that was just described just earlier above, she reached out to him as well on her own, alerting him of what was her own version of the circumstances. Now, imagine an apparently or arguably narcissistic mother trying to reach out to her own son's own friend, in order to essentially try to get to such people first, regarding what we want the narrative, or what we want them to believe and feel, huh? It doesn't work when they have eyes and can see something involving other people's issues. Third parties have a good tendency, as third parties, to see things clearly, much more clearly, oftentimes, very often, than the people involved in their situations themselves, because they let ego get in the way. Furthermore now, where he then learns of the fact that That is where Anthony, of course, then learns of the fact that I have, rightly, of course, in hindsight, charged her, in essence, with the immoral, offensive, and unreasonable actions as having originated with her, and that she's the one responsible for them. Anthony, then, as a result now, supposedly out of a natural concern, which would have been good and proper, although, I'll add here, though this issue may come up regarding this as being something potentially in further doubt now, in hindsight, the more we look at this, but we'll leave it for now, he decided to look into this issue further once this all happened about a year ago. That is, as a sort of third-party intervener, or as a moral witness, in essence, by examining the situation between my own mother and I to see who it was that was wrong and who was right. And as a side note, sadly, I have an extremely small family, a very tiny family, and even fewer people from within the family that care to even be in touch or anything with us. So my family's basically pretty much almost just my mother and I, in essence. And then when my own mother splinters off, morally speaking, into her own realm, I have no family. Everything's starting to make a little bit more sense now. How can it be that a person in this position, exactly like this, and then you turn to your closest friends and they become an extension of your family, in essence, or at least they are supposed to. That's the idea. That's how it works here in life. We'll see if we're all doing the right thing. We'll be evaluating all of the important matters, I believe, here regarding this shortly. Continuing on here. After about several months or longer, Anthony did assert conclusively that it clearly is her, the mother, who was essentially in the wrong. It took several months, however, that was the conclusive finding. However, the plot does thicken furthermore as we head into late last summer. Will the wrongdoers, karmically speaking, be the stubble in life?